morning. Thank you for joining. I know it's early. I know it's just a few of you. It's a long distance if you're not staying in this hotel. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. My name is Nicolas Puyez. I'm working at AWS, specifically leading the Industrial IoT Edge team. I will be joined today on stage by Torben, who's coming from Siemens. He will talk about a couple of things more towards the end of the presentation. So today we'll cover mostly three big topics. The first one will be about building a data foundation and how is that important in the context of digitizing your shop floor environment. The second will be about how do you scale that foundation, and we'll cover also a few customer use cases along the way. So first, I'd like to start a little bit by setting the stage on what's the state of data in industrial environments and manufacturing environments. So industrial environments are quite fertile grounds for data. What we see is, for example, on an offshore oil rig, you'll see close to the amount of 2 terabytes of data generated in a single day. And when you look at manufacturing as another example, you can look at over 1,800 petabytes of data generated over a period of a year. So that's close to 5 petabytes a day on a site. That's an enormous amount of data. Unfortunately, most of it is locked down. What I mean by lockdown essentially means that the data is in silos, typically in either systems that are hermetic to external connection, so unable to extract the data, or it's simply very expensive and takes a long time to implement a solution that's able to extract that data. And in some extreme cases, there is simply no data, so does not contribute to that 1,800 petabytes, but we have equipment that's simply too old to be connected. So there's a solution for that as well. The point being, there's a lot of data that resides on shop floors, but that data is not accessible in most cases, so over 90% of it being locked down. So what's interesting, though, in that is 20% of the value that could be unlocked has already been unlocked, but there's 80% that hasn't. So what that means is there's still an incredible potential to build additional value out of that data. So unlocking that data brings even more potential in increased value on shop floor environments, specifically in building digital use cases that go from edge to cloud. And what we see with companies that start implementing such use cases, build solutions for that, is that they see an increase in productivity by about 50%, up to 50%, and in some cases, they see a decrease in cost of quality by up to 70%. So those are extremely interesting numbers when you take a step back and look at the current state of affairs in terms of digital transformation. What's interesting for me, and this is a very personal view of how I look at the digital transformation, I like to look at it as a journey. So as with any journey, you mature along the way. You may have seen, if you were in Mike McKenzie's presentation yesterday, you've seen something very similar, even though we have, the two of us, a little bit of a different spin on it. From my point of view, I like to look at this more as where manufacturing has started, as traditional manufacturing, where it can go, and I'm not saying it's an end destination for everybody, but where it can go, and we're really progressing into a gradient. So not everybody will be at the same state of maturity. Not everybody needs to be at the same state of maturity. It's really based on use cases, it's based on the industry, and it's based on what makes sense for the business that our customers are in. So we really see that as a progression. Currently, my personal view is we're still very much in the connected manufacturing space. We start to see movement towards software-defined automation. We've heard in the news, we've heard in a few places that lights-out manufacturing is coming, but all of this, for the vast majority of people, is far away. We're still very much in connecting our manufacturing facilities up to the cloud. So what does that mean? If you're at the beginning of the journey or in the middle of the journey, how do you progress into this? How can you achieve a higher level of maturity to gain more insights about your production, how to increase your efficiency? So what we're proposing today is really twofold. We're going to talk first about data foundation, and second, we're going to talk about making that data foundation scale. So what does it mean to build a data foundation? Well, first, it's about breaking those silos I was talking about. So being able to start extracting the data from different environments, different equipment, different system, take that data and start moving it towards the cloud so that we can have a bigger view of the facility, at first at the edge, and second in the cloud of multiple facilities, and start building a better view of how we can optimize and learn across facilities. Second is to organize that data. So most of you that come from manufacturing or industrial know that equipment data does not contain a whole lot of information, right? It's mostly a value that's associated with a tag, a timestamp, and a quality. And sometimes a little bit more, but most of the time that's what it is. So in order to make sense out of that data and transform it into consumable information, we need to add context, and that's by organizing the data. And finally, once we have that information, we make it consumable, it can be translated into insights, and taking those insights into actions at the facility. When it comes to making it scale, I will let Torben talk to us more about that later on, but mostly we're talking about taking a small core that relates to a use case and being able to take that small core, that solution that helps with that use case, and be able to take it from a proof of concept to a production pilot on a single production line to the entire facility to a global deployment, right? So what does it take to be able to do that? So we'll cover that a little bit later. So when it comes to building a foundation, which will be our starting point here, I'm going to start talking to you about what we're doing with AWS IoT Sitewise to build a data foundation, to help you build a data foundation. So Sitewise has been built with the simple concept of saying we need to be able to collect data out of shop floors, be able to contextualize that data, add structure to that data, make the data consumable so that it can be queried in a centralized manner, and we can basically visualize that data with components like Sitewise Monitor, but also open to third-party products because essentially the data is accessible through either REST APIs or through SQL queries, as I will explain a little bit later. So take the data, contextualize it, move it to the cloud, enables our customer to draw insights from it and take action, right? So you can configure rules within Sitewise using events, using alarms to make the data actionable. So those are the big four components that you will find in Sitewise. Now, one thing that is interesting and probably not well known about Sitewise is that we started in the cloud with a simple gateway at the edge that was collecting data, sending it to the cloud, built all of those services in the cloud. And in 2021, we released Sitewise Edge. Sitewise Edge extends those capabilities at the edge. So what we are doing is we're building a ubiquitous model of functionality that resides both on the edge and the cloud. So let's look at a few customers that have used Sitewise and how they've got benefits out of Sitewise. So first one, Toyota. Again, my apologies for those who were in Mike McKenzie's session. I won't go and do a deep dive like he did yesterday with Brad that was on stage, but essentially Toyota implemented a solution for monitoring and maintenance, predictive maintenance, using Sitewise, IoT Sitewise, and using Lookout for Equipment. And through that, they prevented 16 incidents on the shop floor that saved them 20 hours of downtime and essentially roughly 80K of savings. Marmon, which I'll talk in more details in a minute, is another great use case, mostly focused on making data visible to the people on the shop floor. And through that, they were actually able to increase shift productivity by roughly 20%, and they were able to save in the pilot facility, 100K in their first 3 months of operation with this. Yara is a great use case, been a customer with us for quite some time. They've implemented Sitewise across 130,000 assets and across 100 plants, or a little bit over 100 plants, mostly to give self-access to data, to information, to their plant managers, to supervisors that have created their own dashboard to consume the information that's coming from each of their sites, from those 130,000 assets. So what's interesting in what they have done is they're able to compare site to site how the same process is going, how the same assets are performing, what are the level of quality outputted on each of the production line in the different facilities, and be able to learn from that. So when they see, for example, another facility performing better than theirs, they can reach out, understand how that was achieved, and apply those learning themselves. And finally, Hillcorp has implemented Sitewise along with Embassy of Thing, one of our partners, to provide a single source of truth on the data coming from over 20,000 wells in 5 different states. So again, really about first building that strong foundation of bringing data and bringing visibility to that data. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about Marmon. Marmon is a customer we've worked with now for a little bit over a year. Company that has taken Sitewise Edge specifically as something important for them to deploy a solution that would bring them more visibility to their assets. So a little bit about Marmon at first. So it's a 12 billion plus revenue company, has operations in 20 different countries, or over 20 countries, has product and services sold in more than 130 different countries, 400 plus facilities, and more than 25,000 employees. So when you look at this, it's large-scale manufacturing. What's interesting when we start talking about Marmon, from my point of view, is the diversity that exists within Marmon. So Marmon is a holding company, has over 100 different business units providing industrial components, products, services, quite diversified. You look at 11 major business groups going from healthcare, so providing healthcare devices, to things like railways, services around railways, so leasing and also managing the railway operation, electrical, and looking at the production of industrial products as well, as examples of what they do. Highly innovative company, has been around for a long time, but good 70 years of innovation, producing over 100 patents a year. What's interesting is to see the pace at which they're innovating. I've worked with them now, as I said, for a little bit over a year, and it's quite incredible to see how fast they're turning things around and trying them out. So that's really nice to see from a company such as Marmon. So talking a little bit about what they've implemented. Their solution is called Marmon in the Middle, Industrial, MIMI in short, for internally at Marmon. So their solution is really about providing operational visibility, or visibility to operational data to people on the shop floor, to supervisors, shift supervisors, and plant managers, but really focus in the facilities. And all of this is to help everybody in the facility to implement lean techniques across the board and focus on operational improvements. In terms of solution, as I mentioned, an early site-wise edge customer, they've implemented their solution around site-wise edge for a couple of reasons. The main one was to be able to collect data and centralize that data collection at the edge, be able to store some of that data at the edge before sending it to the cloud. Also be able to support intermittent connections, right? So not all of their facilities are located in a place where they can have a resilient internet connection, a connection to the cloud, or at times the speed of that connection is not sufficient to transfer all the data. So they were really looking at building a hybrid edge solution on something, a product that allowed them to support disconnected environments or disconnected situation. So through the building of that solution, they've enabled workers on the shop floor to look at the production data through various dashboards. The dashboards, as we'll see on the next slide, were created using Grafana and built on top of Sitewise Edge using the same APIs that you would find in Sitewise in the cloud. So when I mentioned hybrid edge, this was also an important criteria, is being able to have similar APIs in the cloud and at the edge, building once a solution only once that can work in both environments. So what are the outcomes of this? Well, provided visibility to key metrics. So they have 12 metrics that they've implemented at first, but they've deployed those 12 metrics as standard measures across their facilities, right? So that's the key aspect for them, is providing that normalization of KPIs across each of their different facilities, independent of the business that they are running, but adapting to the reality of that business. So when I talk about diversity, that makes it even more difficult to scale in those environments, right? So you have highly diversified use cases, highly diversified equipment, but being able to draw similar insights or similar KPIs out of that was quite important for Marmon. As I mentioned earlier, that allowed them to save $100K in the first 3 months on the production pilot, right? So this was the pilot facility, good savings, and they continue to operate on that facility, as well as they've scaled to a good number of facilities at this point. We've seen the increase in shift productivity by around 20%. And the way they've approached the deployment of the solution was very human-centric. So they involved a lot of people on the shop floor, specifically at the pilot facility. And through that, really got a good response in the deployment of the solution afterwards. So looking quickly at what is this solution, what they have deployed. So essentially the Mimi edge server component, what's involved, Greengrass, Sitewise Edge, data processing pack of Sitewise Edge, UpSub, which is a component that's not often used out of Sitewise Edge, but provides visibility to everything that's in movement, all the data that's in movement within Sitewise Edge, as well as providing visibility to some key health metrics. So this was really the foundation for their hybrid edge cloud architecture. Focus on normalizing the data before it moves into data warehouses, where they have well-defined tables that can be used by the consuming software. In some cases, using Grafana to build dashboards that brings visibility to their shop floor employees. And as I mentioned, built with third-party components, but also built with the involvement of the employees. This was really critical in Marmon's point of view on how to execute a project. I'm in complete agreement with that. Digital transformation is also very human. We say digital, but it's human-driven digital transformation. So that built huge amount of collaboration across the different teams that were involved, trust, and now it helps with the amplification of the solution, which is a key factor in helping them scale. So, quote from Dr. Jeff Garasia. He's essentially the Chief Innovation Officer at Marmon. We've worked closely with him. We've worked with his team very closely to help with the success of this project. We continue to work with them. Really appreciate the effort that they're doing and how we're working in collaboration with them as well. Okay, on this, we've seen how to go and retrieve data, some use cases to retrieve that data. What does it bring? The question now is, if you would have access to all of that data, what would you do? And the answer is through use cases. We see 3 very common use cases with asset monitoring, which I think I've talked enough about. It's really about visibility on your asset data. Predictive maintenance, talked a little bit about it with the Toyota use case, where really it's about detecting events ahead of time and being able to have countermeasures in place using machine learning. And then enterprise-level visibility. Talked a little bit about that with the Yara use case, right? Where customer Yara is able to see data from multiple facilities and benefit from that visibility to get insights into how to improve in different places. Those are not obviously the only use cases. The list of use cases could be extremely long. I won't go through all of it, but one of the key things for us is we cannot achieve or help our customer achieve a solution that will cover all of those use cases. We need help from partners to make that happen. So we've developed what you see here on screen is what we often call our industrial data fabric. More of an internal name than anything at this point, but it's really how we think about the data foundation. Sitewise is at the core of it, providing services, but we see multiple extension points that are required to complement the Sitewise service so that use cases can be delivered as the end value point to industrial customers. So speaking of partners, really happy to mention that we've released about a week ago or 2 weeks ago support for the integration of Dometica EasyEdge in SiteWise. What that means is that Dometica, through their EasyEdge product, allows customer to now use 10 different protocols on top of OPC UA. So very important, as I mentioned early on, several data silos. Trying to break those data silos requires connecting to different types of equipment, PLCs, SCADAs, DCS. So being able to do that requires support for additional protocols. And very happy to have worked with Dometica on this for essentially the last year. Was a great involvement on their part. So really happy to announce this. As we continue to work with partners, and we'll talk potentially a little bit more about that later, we are also continuing to make SiteWise evolve and build more capabilities focused on two major pillars. One is resolving one of the core challenge we've heard from customers about the cost of implementing a solution with SiteWise, specifically a lot around ingestion of data, storage of data. So we've released features that help with the cost optimization, one that we call adaptive ingest, that have helped us reduce the cost of ingestion by up to 70% compared to what it was before the release of this feature. We've also worked on the second pillar, which is about helping and simplifying the customer experience to get started. So one of the major challenge we heard often from customers was their ability to get started by creating models in SiteWise. This was often referred as a duplication of effort or something that took a long time before getting going. We've done a few things 2 years ago with supporting unmodeled ingest, which was not possible prior to that. And we've continued to evolve on this by being able to now import metadata from other systems. So that means if you have your OSI infrastructure, you have your entity models into OSI, you can now export and re-import into SiteWise. So that's helping customers start much faster with the creation of their models. We've created reusable components as part of our models. That's an important aspect as well that helps with repeatability. And finally, storing metadata time series for the integration with Lookout for equipment. So really making sure we have good structures to exchange data between Lookout for equipment and SiteWise. Both of those products were conceived completely separately. So we've established a bridge between those two to help our customers integrate faster. Okay. On this, we'll switch to looking at how we can make the data foundation scale. And for this, I'd like to invite Torben to come on stage and talk to us a little bit about this. Thank you, Torben.
Thank you. So thanks, Nicolas. Thanks for having me on stage. It's a real pleasure to be here. So my name is Torben. I'm from Siemens Factory Automation. And before I continue to build on what Nicolas already explained, how we want to make digital transformation in manufacturing real, let me quickly explain what Siemens Factory Automation actually does. So we're building hardware and software which are controlling and directing production processes. So if you know our product portfolio, it's like PLCs, SCADA systems, HMIs, MES systems. And in a nutshell, every third factory in the world runs on this Siemens technology. But what we said is also that we don't want to stop in just automating production. We also want to make it more adaptable and more autonomous. And that's also why we're here, and that's why we also want to partner with AWS, because we really want to make that promise of digital manufacturing, smart manufacturing real. Because the reality, though, a lot in our customer base still looks like this. So there are a lot of projects, more than 70%, which actually never get into prod usage on the shop floor. So there are a lot of people spending a lot of time, effort, resources to build a smart solution, but then it's stuck in an isolated installation at one machine in one factory. And that's what we call, this is a lighthouse project, this is a proof of concept, but it's not scaling. And that's actually what we want to do. That's also what we want to do together with AWS. And how we want to do it, we want to bring edge and cloud much closer together. I will tell you about this in a minute, how we want to do this, because ultimately what we think is that this will solve the challenges customers today, manufacturers today face in scaling their IoT solutions. And what are these challenges? So I brought one example from the wastewater industry, but it's a typical example, so you can also kind of see that in different verticals, in automotive, in food and beverage. You can see it in electronics, semiconductors, in all of these verticals. But what we're looking at this point of time is a utility company which is tasked to manage the water supply for a major European capital. So it's very critical infrastructure because you have more than 6 million people relying on this continuous water supply. And it's also a very decentralized asset structure because you have 600 assets, pump stations spread across the country. So they have been quite successfully doing that in the past using operation technologies like drives, pumps, controllers. However, they also said, okay, I want to move into a digital future, so I put up a digital agenda until 2030 where I want to access the sheer unlimited amount of data they have, but in very isolated OT and IT systems. And if you want to start doing that, you need to kind of bridge different networks and different security levels of your network. You start at the pump where you kind of get access to the data, which is on-premise, it's secured, it normally runs also in a demilitarized zone, so no internet connection at all. You want then to provide that data up to a plant level where you can start aggregating it and have already visibility across all the assets. You want to provide data to the cloud for doing some further analytics, getting more insights, and put that back. But that's where the real struggle begins, and that's where you need a highly scalable environment in order to do so, to go from machine level to edge to cloud and back, and that also in a very secure and robust manner. And that's actually the question we wanted to answer with AWS together is, how do we connect the OT environments of the manufacturers today with the IT infrastructure? Because that's what we think is a critical success factor to really go towards digital transformation and smart manufacturing. And in our opinion, the answer is threefold to do that. We need to connect to machine data at scale at the machine level so that you can get access to the machine data in the speed and the quality required. You need to build IoT solution on top of that data, on top of these data foundations Nicholas has been explaining about, also at scale, make it really easy and repeatable, and then you want to roll it out from this one installation to many installations across your factory network. And this is the offering we're launching this week together with AWS, and I will now talk or show it to you how we think it will work, and I hope it also kind of brings across a bit the excitement we feel about it also to you. So first, we want to, as said, connect to machine data at scale. So for that, we need to have computing power at the edge of the network, so what we call industrial edge. And what we provide from Siemens is first an industrial edge device, which has a lot of connectivity applications running on top of it. So you can connect to any of your shop floor asset at the machine level in the speed and the quality required. And we don't only offer that for Siemens equipment, but for every shop floor equipment you can imagine out there, if it's CNC machines, robotics, and stuff like this. But what is the most important step next is that you need to start integrating the data. You transform and contextualizing it. You've built that data foundation, a uniform language of that data, so that, for example, all your machine temperature data is in the same structure using, for example, Celsius, and you can start forwarding that into the overarching systems, to the IT systems. And also there, we have been providing IT connectivity applications where you can forward that to ERP systems, to databases, and so on. And the first thing we're offering now together with AWS is that we are providing AWS IoT Site-Wise Edge as an application running on industrial edge, which makes it much more cost-effective and much more efficient to ingest data directly into the cloud. But as I said, this is just a first step, what we're doing together. The next thing what we really want to also enable is a complete life cycle of data from the machine up to the cloud and also back. So looking like this. So what you can do with that basically is you connect, again, to the machine data, you contextualize, transform it, you kind of pre-process it on the edge, you think about what of that data you want to have really in the cloud, so that you can start thinking about building, for example, AI, ML models, using AWS SageMaker, for example. And then the question is how you package that model and deploy it back on the shop floor in a way that you don't disturb running processes on the factory floor. And also there, we're providing services together that you can package that model, you deploy it on the industrial edge device on an inference running there. And this is also on industrial edge devices having the acceleration needed for these AI, ML use cases. So why is that important? Because we really think that this is providing productivity measures. This is really taking us to smart manufacturing. If you think about that, you want to also have some closed loop use cases, for example, machine vision-based quality inspection, where you have a lot of pictures you take on the shop floor, you want to provide that seamlessly to the cloud, you want to train them, but the model needs to run on the shop floor at the edge, for example, in real time, sorting out wrong and good products with a closed loop integration with a PLC. And that's what we want to realize here. So next is that we said, okay, now we have the machine connectivity at scale. You can have these data foundations. You have that continuous flow. So how we can now start building these IoT solutions on it, also at scale. For that, we're providing so-called off-the-shelf applications. We call them industrial edge applications. They will not be provided only by Siemens, but also by AWS. So AWS IoT Site-Wise Edge is an industrial edge application. And everybody else can provide them as well. So we're also working with independent software vendors to provide applications for different use cases on the shop floor. But it also means for us as Siemens that we're moving into what we call a software-defined automation. That some of our core automation functionalities like control, motion, SCADA, MES, they become industrial edge applications and can run on different hardware, either at the machine level or at the factory level. So these industrial edge applications are available on the industrial edge marketplace. You can get different applications for connectivity to the shop floor, connectivity to the IT systems. You can have data management applications. You can also have different applications for doing value-adding use cases like machine uptime improvements, OEE. You can do predictive maintenance, and also what we talked about, machine vision-based quality inspections applications. For us, as said, it's an open approach, so we invite everybody to also provide their off-the-shelf applications for use cases they think that they will scale across the manufacturing base. So these applications can run either on the machine level for really real-time applications where closed loop integration is required, but they can also run on the factory level, where you want to have more horizontal scalable IoT solutions, for example, providing a horizontal scaling data integration level up to the cloud and back. What is also very important for us is that these applications are interoperable with each other, that you can flexibly exchange them, that they are qualified. So we spend also a lot of time to make them work together, to have really a proper quality measures in place that they work together. Because in this sense, B2B is very different from B2C. As you know, for example, on your smartphone, you have different applications. Normally, one application constitutes one use case. So if you have your calendar application, that helps you manage your time. But in B2B, on the shop floor, you need to have different applications for connectivity, data management, value-adding stuff that is all integrated and works as a system together and can also be managed as a system. Right. So this is how we want to help building IoT solutions at scales, offering these off-the-shelf building blocks. But then also, this is an open approach where we also say everybody's invited to build applications for some specific customer needs or manufacturing needs. So you can use different programming languages to build the industrial edge applications. It's very easy to put them on an industrial edge device. You can do that as manufacturing yourself, as a developer, but you can also ask global system integrators, solution partners to do it on your behalf. Or you're taking, for example, Mendix as a low-code, no-code application development platform to do that. And Mendix will help you to develop applications 10 times faster than in the traditional way. The beauty also with Mendix is that this is an application development platform running on the AWS. You can build lots of applications in the cloud. Now it's also running on Edge. So what we did is that we kind of really made it very simple to develop an application in Mendix and deploy it on Industrial Edge. Also from a business model approach that you can scale with the number of applications running on Siemens Industrial Edge. And with Mendix also using that continuous data flow between machine, edge, cloud level, and back, we have that data integration at all levels. Meaning in Mendix, once you have built a dashboard, you can have on the same data level providing insights to the machine operator at the machine level, but you can also provide insights to the factory manager at the factory level on the same data with the same application, and the same on the cloud level if you want to have insights and benchmark across different factories and lines the results. So let's recap a bit. What we said is we want to build or connect to machine at scale. We want to build IoT solution at scale, now helping with off-the-shelf applications, but also using low-code, no-code platforms. Now, how do I get from this one installation I built up to many installations, to many use cases across the factory network? And for that, what we're using a software, an orchestration software, which we call Siemens Industrial Edge Management. And it basically does two things. So first, it helps you to connect to all your industrial edge devices, which are spread across the factory network. So you can remotely connect to these industrial edge devices, you onboard them, you can manage the firmware on it, you can do the monitoring of the health and resource status. Of course, you can offboard them as well. And the Siemens Industrial Edge Management does the full application lifecycle, so that you can start mass rollout of applications. You install them on many devices, can start configure them for connectivity, you update, upgrade them as you like. And then this becomes really repeatable. Once you have built one use case on one device, you configured it, you just need some clicks on a button to repeat it and to spread it to many other industrial edge devices at similar installations, similar machines on the factory level. So, and we're doing this with the Siemens Industrial Edge Management really like in an approach that helps customer depending on their competence profile. So if you don't want to have all the necessary work to manage and operate an industrial edge management system, we provide it as a software as a service running on AWS. But you can also have the industrial edge management deployed on-premise, running, for example, as a VM in a VM cluster or as a container running on Kubernetes. Right, so again, from a recap perspective, so we said we want to make smart manufacturing real. For that, we want to provide data foundations, a uniform language for data where we can create and scale IoT solutions on top. So we're doing that with connecting to machine data at scale, building these solutions with standard applications off the shelf. You can even provide your own applications in a very easy manner. And we also said, okay, we have the industrial edge management system to make it repeatable. So this is the joint offering, actually, we have been talking about between AWS and Siemens, and this is like how it looks, bring it all together in one kind of slide. I personally think this is game-changing. I'm very excited about this. I think it's the first time in the industry that you have the full edge-to-cloud experience, and this also from a workflow, from a user experience in a very, very easy manner. So first time you can have this consistent data flow, manage your data lifecycle from the machine edge to cloud and backwards. You can drive these AI ML use cases. You can drive other solutions via providing via these industry edge applications where you can create and scale them out for different topics like productivity measures on the shop floor, for sustainability measures, but also to make it more flexible how you operate on the shop floor. What AWS will provide as a value, as a key value, which I think is very important, is infrastructure as a service, so that you can make it very robust, very secure and simple to scale that out. We from Siemens will provide as a key value some infrastructure components on the industrial edge level, like the industrial edge management system, but we will also focus very much on the application value. So we want to provide applications which will help the manufacturers to reap really the full benefits of digital transformation. Again, if it's quality control, predictive maintenance, OEE improvements, all of this. All right, so with that, this is, I think, what I wanted to talk about. This is like what we're really announcing. I hope you're also excited about this as we are. And with that, I want to ask Nicholas back on stage. And Nicholas can give us an outlook how we want to progress from here.
Sounds good. Thank you, Torben.
Sure.
Okay. Great. I think Torben covered this extremely well. I'm going to move right away into the next slide, which is to talk about what we've announced a little bit earlier this week. You may have seen this already. If not, Sitewise Edge is formally available on the Siemens Industrial Edge Marketplace. Torben did a great explanation over the last few minutes around this. I share the excitement. For me, this is amazing to see how we're connecting the machine level all the way up to the cloud in a very secure manner, and in a way that data can be contextualized, can be transformed into consumable information all the way through. So basically attaching scale, attaching the shop floor at scale with the cloud offering, and be able to start drawing better insights from that data. So that simplifies drastically also the user experience in the sense that now you don't have to deal with multiple disjointed parts to assemble. You have a single pipeline that's coming from Siemens Industrial Edge with Sitewise Edge residing on it all the way to the AWS cloud. So coming back to the initial question at the beginning of this session, how can you achieve higher level of digital maturity? So I hope that through this session, you've been able to get some level of learnings of how you could achieve that. I'll start by saying as a key takeaway that building a strong data foundation is absolutely essential as a starting point, as we've seen with a few customer use cases, starting with building that foundation to monitor data. Just bringing visibility to data itself brings an extreme amount of value to customers.
Right, and then I think I covered really the part of we want to make it scalable, right? Remember this picture of the Lighthouse project where you have put so much effort in one installation, in this one use case, now we need to make it scale. And I think we can only make it scale by bringing edge and cloud together, by breaking down the OT and IT data silos for building the data foundation models, but then having the right applications on the shelf to really drive productivity measures on the shop floor.
Okay, and that should lead you to be able to enable more use cases, accelerate time to value with a simpler offering that's already connected, reduce scaling cost because it's highly repeatable, and in the end, being able to gain more meaningful insights. So that brings us to the end of this session. I'll leave you with a few resources that you can scan the QR code and get access to, that will give you access to a blog post that was produced that explains what we have done with Siemens, one on AWS IoT Sitewise Edge, and the press release that was made by Siemens, I'll say Monday, I think was around midnight this time on Monday. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your attention. We have about 10 minutes left, so we won't take questions on stage, but if you want to talk to us. You have any questions, please feel free to come and join us off stage. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Survey, please.